Hey, good Wednesday afternoon, church family. I hope you were well. Hope you got rain at your place today. It's nice to just see God replenish the earth around the hill country and fill up our lakes and streams. Praying that you're all well and COVID free. And those who have been able to make it on Sunday, we certainly appreciate your presence here at the building, but also certainly appreciate those who are joining us online each week to the worship. Just a reminder that beginning next Wednesday, this live stream will start taking place at 6:30 p.m. I will have a live audience class in the fellowship hall on spiritual formation beginning next Monday. We'll do noon on Monday and then 6:30 on Wednesday. And if you hadn't signed up for that or want to be a part of it, just let me know. We're trying to do that in the fellowship hall and keep people moderately spaced out, and so that if we can alleviate some of the COVID concerns. But so we'll start streaming this Wednesday section at 6:30 beginning next week. So thought we would enter into another discipline that's contemplative in nature. We looked last week at Ignatian spirituality and the idea of the examen. This week is a little more, I guess, actively involved practice that you do throughout the day and really at any time of the day, and which we'll get into a bit. It's just called practicing the presence. That is our desire to be aware of God's presence and God's activity in every part of our life and every moment of our day. This became popularized in the 17th century through the work of a man by the name of Nicholas Herman. Nicholas was French, wasn't sure what he wanted to do. He grew up very poor. He joined the army as a young adult and served as a soldier mostly so he could eat and have a place to live. He became injured in the army, left that, worked some odd jobs, and then he really, at the age of 18, became a follower of Christ. But throughout his life, he really began to think about dedicating a life to the ministry of Jesus. And so at about age 40, he had an experience with a dead tree that really, as the winter was ending and spring was about to come and bringing forth new life, that really kind of shook him up spiritually. And at that point, he decided to go be a part of a monastery. His desire was to be a monk, and so he, through some various things, he's rather clumsy and kind of awkward. He ended up being a lay person with the Descalces Carmelites in France, that is the barefoot monks, and joined their monastery in their community in Paris, and then took on the name Brother Lawrence. And so it is through just his life and some things that he experienced that we come to know about this discipline known as practicing the presence of God. And so what the practice of the presence of God is about, the written work, is a collection of conversations and letters, letters from Brother Lawrence and conversations with him, that really began to shape and mold his whole attitude about God and about the awareness of God that he had, and how to dedicate a life fully to God and to be completely open to God. That's available for you if you want it. You can buy it in book form on Amazon. It's available on the internet in a PDF form, so you can certainly download that and print it and read it. It's pretty insightful and interesting. Most translations are kind of in Old English translation. There's some newer translations of that, but I'd recommend reading it if you're not familiar with it. But it's not a difficult read. It's not too many pages, and it really just gives you insight into the mindset of being completely open to God at all times and throughout every aspect of our day. And so I just wanted to go through the practice of that. If you read Brother Lawrence's work, there's some major themes that keep recurring through these conversations and letters. One, there is a desire to have a habitual awareness of God's presence and God's activity in our life, from the very mundane things to really the things that are super exciting or maybe really visible and public in nature, but always to be aware of God's presence. One of the things that Brother Lawrence wanted was to give everything that he had to God for all that God would accomplish with him and through him and by him and in this world. He's also very attuned to the idea of indifference, in this sense that he was indifferent to everything except what was God's will. And it took some discipline to get there, obviously. And really the ultimate thing of practicing the presence is this: that there's just an ongoing conversation with God throughout the day. And so just like last week when we thought about the examine, that passage from Paul in 1 Thessalonians 5, to pray without ceasing is still behind, I think, some of this discipline or practice that we read about in practicing the presence. Just to go through what this is about. The goal of the discipline is to intentionally affirm that every moment in life is a gift from God, and a desire for us to live into a deeper awareness of God's activity in our lives. And then through this discipline or exercise, we both verbally and actively express our intention to continue to live in union with Jesus and to follow Jesus as a disciple in all that we do, and even giving our thoughts into captivity to Jesus, and our words and our actions and our attitudes would be the main goal of practicing the presence. If I wanted to define what this discipline was about, it's really focusing on an awareness of Christ's presence in our life through the Holy Spirit's indwelling in us personally and within the community of God's people. And really, this is more about a personal relationship with God than really strategy or technique or specific activities, although I will certainly want to share some of those with you today, maybe how to put this into action in your daily lives. Like other practices, I would say to start the day with prayer. Since this is an ongoing practice throughout the day, you might pray this prayer or something similar to it first thing in the morning, but maybe just any time that throughout the day when you're stopping and reflecting on God's presence and God's activity. And so this is a prayer of Brother Lawrence and in his work. So it'd be a prayer something like this: "Oh my God, since you are with me, and I must now, in obedience to your commands, apply my mind to these outward things," that is, the things he'd be doing, "I beseech you, grant to me the grace to continue in your presence. And to this end, do prosper me with your assistance, receive all my works, and possess all my affections." So the essence of the prayer is we're in the presence of God. God has expressed his will to us through his word. We have been called to do certain things, whether that's in specific ministry to the church or our own vocations, and that as we do those things, to remember that we are constantly in the presence of God, and then that everything that we do in our life is for the glory of God, and the love of God is which compels us to do that. If that's doing tax returns or building houses or teaching school, or working in a restaurant or whatever we're doing, that we give those works to the glory of God. And we do that because of God's love for us and our love for God, and ultimately our love for humanity. And so we embody the great commandment of Jesus in a prayer like this, to love God and love neighbor. So just some suggestions for the discipline or the practice. Again, these could be varied. I'll give you some examples. One, take an activity: mowing the yard, playing golf, teaching a class, cooking a meal for your family. Dedicate that activity to God. And to begin with this, a prayer. that God, I will, in this activity, fill in the blank. I want to honor you. I want to express my love for you. I want to express my love for your people. And then as you're doing the activity, reflect and see, are you in tune to God? Is God in some way speaking to you through that activity, or shaping and molding you? Or are there other people involved that God has put in your pathway into your presence, where you can be aware of the presence of God? So I'll give you an example of Brother Lawrence's life. He was a cook at the monastery, and often the meal would include potatoes. And so what he would do is he peeled the potato. He would think about all the monks in the monastery, and as he peeled each potato, he would pray to God or acknowledge to God, God, this potato is a gift from you, and today I prepare it for brother so-and-so. Peel it, drop it in the pot. He would do that throughout the day, and just sit in then reflection of what God has done and what God was doing with each of those individuals that he was cooking for, or the produce that was provided, or the meat that would be provided for a meal. So you could do that, as silly as it might sound, with every golf shot that you hit on the golf course. Can you dedicate that leisure activity or that recreation activity, and those that you're experiencing activity with, could you dedicate that to God? And could you honor God through that? And can God be seen through your actions and through your words through that activity? Or would you pray for those folks as you're playing golf, and maybe, forbid that you even pray that they make that putt, right, to beat you. But to dedicate the activity to God. Another way to do that is to reflect on God's presence in conversations that you have with people. Maybe you hear a song on the radio, or a church hymn comes to mind, and just reflect on what is God saying here, and how is God speaking to my life in this moment, at this time, in this situation with that. It's a great thing to do also during worship when we sing songs, and just where we recognize God at work through the words of those songs, and maybe even after worship, take some time to sit and to reflect on that. And then we have conversations with people. God blesses us with opportunities most days to talk to people about things going on in their life, and how is God at work in here? How could I partner and join what God's doing? How could I reveal God to someone through a conversation that's going on? And so not only an activity, but just to reflect then on God's presence in conversation or song. Another way is to practice the presence is if you're busy doing a task, you're on the job, you're focused in, you get one of those interrupting phone calls, or even if it's a telemarketer, or something that just unexpected. When tasks are interrupted, maybe God is there, and to recognize, hey, what's going on in your mind, and where was your heart, and where was your mind? Is God trying to get your attention, for example, through that interruption? But look for God's presence, and don't look at those as, wow, I just wasted some time. Maybe those are good times to reflect that God is still present and God is active, and maybe our focus was in the wrong place. Maybe our heart was in the wrong place when we're doing a task or a job, and those interruptions, which irritate us often, are maybe just God's way of getting our attention to refocus and to reflect again that this task that has given us, that is an opportunity for us to be aware of God and to glorify God through that task. You can do some other things too. Plan some stops during your day. Set a timer throughout the day, once an hour, or once every 2 hours, or 3 times a day, or whatever that is, and just be intentional about stopping and reflecting. Hey, where did I see God today? Where did I notice God? Where did I honor God? Where did I dishonor God? And maybe reflect on some texts of Scripture that you may start the day with, or whatever your daily reading schedule would be, and how did that Scripture intersect with what was going on with you that day. And then don't be afraid to ask the question, hey, what's God doing with me today? And what's God doing around me today? and what's God doing in my world today. And sometimes we get so busy, just being busy, that we don't stop and see God. We miss things. I'm big on just having a notepad or using the note function or app on your smartphone. When you see God at work, just stop and write it down and jot some thoughts down. And if you can't do it at the moment, you can use, there's audio recorders. You can do voice recorders on your phone. Keep a notepad around your house, so when you conversations with your family or things that are going on, that maybe you just recognize the presence of God, that you want to remember that, and so write those things down and make some notes, and then ask yourself, what's God doing? Where is God in our world? Where was God in the things that brought joy? Where is God in the things that were stressful, that maybe had pain involved in them, that involved some suffering? Where was God in the relationships that I have today? Did I meet new people? Did I rekindle a relationship with someone or an acquaintance I haven't seen in a long time? And what's God trying to do? I think would be a surprise at how often that we forget that God is around us. But when we stop and reflect on this, on just the presence of God, we recognize just how active and how close and imminent God is in our lives. And then a couple other things to do just to help with this practicing the presence is to look at others through the eyes of God, as those who are created in the image of God, and how God may be working in and through them on our behalf, or for the behalf of the community, or in their own family. Are they in pain, and are they hurting? Do they need compassion? Do they need someone to celebrate with? Do people need someone just to walk alongside them in silence, like at least in the beginning the friends of Job did? So begin to look at others through the eyes of God, not just in some utilitarian sense about what they can do for me or what they're doing in life, but where's God in their life as well, and how would God view their situation in life, and how could I speak into that on behalf of God? And then finally, maybe you've got some symbols that bring God's presence to mind. I guess I'm fortunate my office is full of those symbols. Some of those are kind of stark. One of our former elders gave me a cat of nine tails, a whip, similar to what was used on Jesus in the crucifixion, that I keep on a bookshelf that I see off. I'm not sure what message he was trying to send, but it's a reminder, right, of the presence of Jesus. People have brought me artifacts from places around the world, whether that be a replica of a baptistry in Croatia, or a crown of thorns from the Middle East, or one of our members made a painting for me where I look around my office all day long, and it's just a reminder in these symbols and these images about the reality of Jesus in my life and the reality of God. So just maybe there's some symbols that you have. Bibles, I'm a book nerd, so I've got dozens of copies of Bibles that are sitting around my office that I don't use each one of them every day, but they're constantly reminders of what God has done and who God is, and God's overarching involvement in in our lives and through human history. And so whatever symbols that you have that might help you just reflect on God is another way to spend some time in practicing the presence. Really, it's a life of training, and if you read Brother Lawrence's work, he'll tell you it was hard. The first 10 years were really difficult, and then it became just part of who he was and part of his life to be so in tune to the will of God and the love of God and the presence of God that the most mundane things in life that he did, peeling potatoes or washing dishes, could be a reflection of God to others and a reflection of God to himself. And so, again, it's contemplative, and don't be, I would journal these things and to reflect on them. And again, it's not for everybody to do this, but I think it's a good practice and a good reminder that God's presence is constant and around us. Whether we acknowledge it or not, God is present, And so as we become more in tune to the presence of God, we become more aware of the activity of God, then we can better align ourselves to the will of God. So I hope you can enjoy some of the ideas from practicing the presence. Again, don't forget that beginning next Wednesday, this will be streamed live at 6:30. God bless.